Hey, this is Jeff, and today I'm doing an empirical analysis of speech challenges in Fallout 3. In New Vegas, speech challenges have a threshold. The game designer sets the threshold for a dialogue option, and if your speech is that number or higher, you pass, otherwise you fail. But in Fallout 3, they set a difficulty rating from very easy to very hard. There's a formula that determines the likelihood of success, and the game rolls virtual dice to see if you pass or fail. The good news is that formula is available on the GEC Wiki. The bad news is, to predict your chances at any given speech challenge, you need to get the value of a lot of different variables from the game, some of which can only be seen with console commands, and plug them into the formula, which is non-trivial. So I'm going to explain the formula first, and then show you some speech challenges in the game so you can see more intuitively how it all fits together. The first thing that surprised me is that anything above 90% automatically succeeds. Like anybody who's played this game a lot, I know the frustration of failing a speech challenge that seemed like a sure thing, but they must have been in the high 80s, not the 90s. I'm guessing that's why this setting exists. A playtester failed a 99% check and they were like, yeah, customers are going to rage quit if this happens. So they put this in to prevent the worst slap-in-the-face scenarios. That frustration is probably part of the reason Obsidian opted for a threshold rather than a random chance in New Vegas. I didn't verify it experimentally because when the chance of failure is 1 in 10 or less, you could easily try 10 or 20 times and never see one, just due to normal statistical distribution. You'd have to run at least 50 trials to have a high level of confidence in the result, and since this is a dialogue thing, there's no way to automate it like I did with the sneak and detection tests. So I'm just going to take their word for it. Now, the formula. Pass chance equals disposition value times speech value times difficulty value. Each of those values has its own subformula, which vary greatly in complexity. Let's look at difficulty value first, because it's the easiest factor to understand, and more importantly, it's the base chance for passing a speech challenge, which is modified by the other two factors. It's based on game settings, and if you plug them into the formula, it ranges from 0.9, or a 90% chance for very easy, down to 0.2, or a 20% chance for very hard. So far, so good. Proceeding backward through the formula, because speech value is also pretty simple. With speech 50, it multiplies difficulty by 1, so it neither adds nor subtracts from whatever your chances are based on the other factors. With speech 25, that chance will be half what it would be with speech 50, and with speech 100, it's double, up to the cap of 100%. And finally, we have the disposition value, which has two subformulas of its own for charisma value and karma value, plus it handles the penalty for talking to someone with your weapon drawn and the NPC's actual in-game disposition toward the player. Charisma has a similar effect to speech skill, but it's not quite as powerful. With Charisma 5, there's no change to whatever your success chance would be based on the other factors. With Charisma 1, that chance will be about 2/3 of what it would be with Charisma 5, and with Charisma 10, it's 1.5 times higher. And that stacks with your speech skill, although the effect of high charisma can be canceled out by karma, disposition, or talking with your weapon drawn, while speech skill can't. The karma value is a little more complicated for several reasons. First, it also depends on the NPC's responsibility attribute. That determines how much they care about the player's karma. At 50, they don't care. If it's lower, speech checks are easier if you have evil karma. If it's higher, they're easier if you have good karma. It's also tricky because there's no way to see exactly what your karma score is unless you use console commands. And finally, the weight of karma here is insignificant, 0.02 plus or minus, so it might seem like it doesn't matter at all, but karma also affects NPC disposition, completely independent from the speech challenge calculation, and disposition is also a factor in this formula. We'll talk about what that means for speech challenges in a minute. Back in the top-level subformula, if you have your weapon drawn when you talk to somebody, speech challenges will be 10% harder. That's not a flat 10% subtraction, it's multiplicative. What I mean is, if your chance is 50% unarmed, it would be 45 with your weapon drawn, not 40. And finally, the NPC's actual in-game disposition toward the player. All NPCs and creatures have a base disposition attribute between 0 and 100 that reflects how much they like people in general. The game actually tracks it separately for every other character they interact with, but only their disposition toward the player matters. It's only used in dialogue, not for whether they'll attack, which I explained how that works in the Secret Benefits of Perks video. Anyway, what disposition does do, certain dialogue has different options if the NPC really likes you or hates you. There's a very slight difference in their body language animations when they greet you, and relevant to the topic at hand, it modifies the difficulty of speech challenges. The game considers Disposition 30 to be average, and at exactly 30 there will be no bonus or penalty to whatever your chances are based on the other factors. At 0, that chance will be 0.7 times what it would be at Disposition 30, and at 100 the chance would be 1.7 times higher. Now, while 30 is the average, some NPCs start higher, some lower, which is usually but not always reflected in the writing and voice acting. It can be modified by all kinds of things in the game, but the general rule is if you do stuff they like, they'll like you more. If you do stuff they don't like, they'll like you less. And as previously mentioned, it's also affected by your karma, depending on their responsibility attribute. If their responsibility and your karma are both low or both high, their disposition will be higher. If one is high and one is low in either direction, their disposition will be lower, which means karma is indirectly double counted in the formula. So it becomes very important for speech challenges with NPCs whose responsibility attribute is a lot higher or a lot lower than 50. But where the rubber meets the road is in the game. So let's talk to some people. Right now I have speech skill 50, charisma 5, my weapon is holstered. Use the console to confirm my karma is 0. Lucas's responsibility is 50, which is what I want, but his base disposition is 35 because he's more of a people person than average, so I'm using the console to lower it to 30. And plugging in all those variables, the formula says my chance of passing a speech check should be whatever the default is for its difficulty. 90% for very easy, 60% for easy, 45 for average, 30 for hard, and 20 for very hard. The speech challenge to get more money for disarming the bomb is hard, so my success chance is... drum roll, please. As expected, 30%. Now that we have a baseline, the easiest factor to test by far is talking to him with a weapon drawn. That's a 10% penalty. Our baseline chance is 30. 10% of 30 is 3, so our chance should be 27%. A straight 10% subtraction would make our chance right now 20%, but in certain circumstances that could put it below 0. Negative numbers have caused problems in games many times, so designing the formula to prevent that might have just been better safe than sorry. And as expected, it's 27%. I'm using the console for these tests for 2 reasons. First, it would take forever to do quests or whatever to increase stats by leveling up, and there's no way to lower them once they've been raised. More importantly, there might also be effects that would contaminate the results, like if I leveled up to raise my speech skill, but in the process I gained or lost a bunch of karma. Anyway, I set my charisma back to 5, speech to 25, and the chance is 15%, exactly half of our baseline 30%, just as predicted by the formula. Going the other way, speech 100, everything else the same, chance is 60%, exactly double the baseline. Using the exact same method, but with speech back to 50 and charisma set to 1, 21%. I was expecting 18, but I probably forgot to carry a decimal or something. And with charisma set to 10, 45%, exactly half again as high as the baseline. Spot on. And finally, as I mentioned a minute ago, the chance can't be below 0, but it absolutely can be 0. I set my charisma to 1 and speech to 15, and Lucas is having none of it. As I mentioned when we looked at the formula, karma is kind of tricky to test for 2 reasons. First, you can only see your karma score with console commands. I used the console to make it 1000, max good, all other factors the same as the baseline test. But even trickier, the magnitude of the karma factor depends on the NPC's responsibility attribute, and to see what it is, you either have to use a console command or look them up in the GEC. So for example, Lucas's responsibility is 50, meaning he doesn't care one way or the other about your karma. And sure enough, success chance 30, same as the baseline. Now, rather than run around the wasteland trying to find somebody with a different responsibility level, I used the GEC. Unfortunately, responsibility isn't a field you can sort or filter by. You have to go into the NPC object screen and look at them individually. Which I did for a lot of them, even after I found one that would work for the test, because what I found piqued my interest and I kind of went down a rabbit hole. I didn't look at every NPC in the game because there are hundreds, but I checked enough to identify some broad trends. And find a test subject, obviously. Anyway, more than half of the NPCs in the game are set at 50. Most of the rest are either 99 or 100. I only found 2 characters below 50. Now, in some cases, it makes sense lore-wise. Dukov doesn't care about your karma as long as you'll drink with him. Brotherhood of Steel personnel don't care because despite the Lions faction in Fallout 3 being pretty decent people, in the franchise overall, they're amoral at best. Caravan merchants don't care because they do business with anybody from Rivet City to Paradise Falls. Ditto for Uncle Ro and the rest of Canterbury Commons, except the Mechanist has responsibility 90, because whether or not you think he's the good guy in the story, that's how he sees himself. The higher your karma, the more he'll like you. And the opposite is true for the antagonizer. Her responsibility is 10, so the lower your karma, the easier her speech challenge will be. In fact, the residents of most small settlements, including the Temple of the Union, are also 50, presumably because they usually have some major problem, and if you're willing to help, they don't have the luxury of judging you. Same is true of Megaton and Underworld. The exceptions are Tenpenny Tower and Rivet City, where everybody has responsibility of 99 or 100, maybe reflecting that they're the two most secure settlements in the wasteland and they can afford to be a little more picky about their friends. Rivet City includes Dr. Lee and her team, and oddly, Zimmer and Armitage. Odd because their own karma is evil, but they like you more if you're not. Again, probably reflecting that they see themselves as the good guys, even though by most people's standards, they're not. And Riley's Rangers all have high responsibility, except Donovan for some reason, because they clearly are the good guys. And then we get into some weird ones. Everyone in Arafu has high responsibility, even though when you come across them, they're in the same "please help us or we're going to die" situation as most of the other small settlements. I could see that for Braley, who's living in a sort of pre-war fantasy world in her head, but the rest of them seem pretty pragmatic. And the really weird thing is, there are a ton of NPCs you'd expect to respect you more if you're evil, like Smiling Jack, but his responsibility is 50, so he doesn't care one way or the other. Although, the only way you can talk to him is if you kill everyone else at Evergreen Mills, so I guess I can see where he might not be inclined to judge you if you just want to do some shopping instead of killing him too. And even more strangely, slavers are responsibility 50. Eulogy kind of makes sense. His dialogue literally says he makes no judgments or assumptions, so he doesn't care what kind of person you are if he can make a sale. But like Grouse openly displays his contempt for Goody Two-Shoes characters, so it seems weird that he doesn't like you more if you're evil. The only one I found who does is Crimson, responsibility 20, so if you're using subterfuge to help the kids from Lamplight escape, her speech challenge is easier if you're evil. Like I said, I didn't check every NPC in the game, but I looked at dozens, and Crimson and the Antagonizer are the only two I found with responsibility less than 50. There were a couple at 90, and the rest were all either 50, 99, or 100. If I had to guess, that's probably because setting unique values for NPCs who don't have any speech challenges would be wasted effort, and even for the ones who do, tweaking values between the extremes of doesn't care and cares a lot would take time and might not have made a difference the player would notice in-game. Anyway, I reloaded from the autosave at the vault exit to eliminate the possibility that something I did in Megaton might skew the results, so I'm back to Speech 50, Charisma 5, and Karma 0. I turned on God mode, came straight to Tenpenny Tower, got the quest from Gustavo, because that was the quickest way I could think of to get a reasonably difficult speech challenge from a character with high responsibility. The option to squeeze Gustavo for more ammo is only easy, so a lot of the factors I'm testing bumped the success chance up to 100, making it impossible to be more precise than saying, yep, it helped. But the option to persuade the bigots to leave is average, which should be hard enough to let us quantify the effect. Millie's base disposition is 35, same as Lucas, so I used the console to set it to 30. And sure enough, success chance is 45, the default for an average difficulty check with all other factors being neutral. I bumped my karma up to 1,000, and now it's 77. Remember when I was talking about the formula, I said karma looks insignificant, but it's secretly double counted? Her disposition, which was 30, went all the way up to 100 when I bumped up my karma. Speech difficulty 45 times 1.7, the bonus for 100 disposition, plus the tiny bonus for the karma itself adds up to 77 we saw. To isolate the effect of karma alone, we'll use a console command to knock that back down to 30. Another interesting bit of disposition trivia that I discovered way back working on Mea Culpa. Even though the game only returns values between 0 and 100 in the console or runtime scripts, it actually tracks numbers below 0 or above 100 behind the scenes. So in-game, I could have done 28 points worth of stuff that pissed her off and she wouldn't have liked me any less. But let's get that the rest of the way down to 30 and check again. And now with Karma 1000 but neutral disposition, we're back to 45. The effect of Karma by itself, 1.02 times 45, is less than 1 full percentage point, so there's no visible difference in-game. And just to be thorough, with Karma negative 1000, max evil, her disposition is 0 and the success chance is 32%. 45 times 0.7, exactly what the formula predicts. I don't need to test disposition independent of karma because even in the two extreme cases we just tested, the karma effect was less than 1 full point. If her disposition was high or low because of something other than karma, the calculation result would have been different by that fractional amount, but the success chance in-game would have been exactly the same after it was rounded to an integer for the dialogue menu. So, bottom line, the things that affect your speech chance in order of importance are: first, your speech skill, which has a linear relationship. At speech 25, your success chance is half what it would be at speech 50, and at 100, it's double. Second, the NPC's disposition toward you. There's no way to see what it is without using console commands, but if somebody really likes you or really hates you, it can be almost as important as your speech skill. At 0, your success chance will be 0.7 times what it would be at disposition 30, and at 100, it'll be 1.7 times higher. Third, karma, but only for NPCs who care about it, mainly people in Rivet City and Tenpenny Tower. Even though its weight in the speech challenge formula is negligible, karma also strongly sways the disposition of those people behind the scenes. Fourth, your charisma. With charisma 1, your success chance will be about 2/3 of what it would be with charisma 5, and with charisma 10, it's 1.5 times higher. Finally, having your weapon out imposes a 10% penalty. And that's it. As always, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, leave a comment if there's something I missed, and I'll see you next time.